when you're talking about a feisty woman, we can talk about what does that feistiness look like? It isn't just quiet, it's quiet action.
She took no guff.
Just be yourself, and if they don't like you, they know how to turn you off.
Holding her own, she had to be tough. Fights for what they believe in and goes against the grain.
She did it on her own back in a time where women weren't even allowed to do it.
That brick wall did not stop her. She was feisty enough to say, there are other ways.
She took no prisoners.
The tenacity of this woman to never give up.
She made her own way where she was.
She was ahead of her time.
She was forward thinking.
Definitely stood on her own.
Women were a real actionable force in this town. They got things done.
These are the stories of 5 feisty women who have shaped the past and laid the foundation for the future of Great Falls.
She stood out, both physically, mentally, and personally. And when you bring that up to today in terms of feisty women as a foundation, who would be a better representative of a feisty woman that you would be proud of other than Mary Fields?
Stagecoach Mary is a very interesting character.
A unique and outstanding individual.
Mary Fields is one of those personalities that just really sticks out amongst the nuns.
Mary Fields is one of my favorites.
How could you possibly ignore the feisty, colorful lady standing to my right, Mary Fields? It's interesting that eBay should feature a model of Mary Fields complete with rifle and whiskey and of course dressed in men's trousers, and you know that ties so well in with the legends surrounding that amazing woman. There's no question that Mary Fields was a colorful, feisty woman. The question that a historian like I am has is with the extremes the legends have taken her.
Mary Fields was born in Tennessee in the 1830s. She was born in slavery, and at one point she became a servant in the Doone household. And that name's going to become important because the Doone family is a family who their eldest daughter became an Ursuline nun and led the charge out west. So here you have Mary Fields taking this position with the Doone family in Ohio. Born in Tennessee, she moves up to Ohio to help the Doone family. She was about 15 years older than Sarah Doone, who would become Sister Amadeus and then Mother Amadeus and lead the nuns out west. Mother Amadeus becomes ill. She actually got a terrible case of pneumonia, and she sends for Mary Fields, and Mary Fields promptly comes. And Mary Fields stays on after Amadeus gets well from her bout with pneumonia and helps at the mission. There's a stone convent in the background. Here's Mary Fields, of course.
Mary Fields was, quote, hired at St. Peter's Mission as a groundskeeper, and she performed a very valuable service, but it was pretty controversial because she always refused to sign a contract. She refused wages, and therefore she retained 100% independence.
Thinking about the ways that Mary Fields made what the Ursulines were doing at St. Peter's possible, she was a protector, she was a nurse, she kept a huge garden that had them fed. She had 400 chickens.
As one of the nuns at the Ursuline said about her temper and her temperament is, if she's just mowed the lawn, you sure better not walk on it.
She was said to be 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. She carried a gun, she drank and she smoked, but she always wore a dress. A clash that she has with one of the ranch hands, they actually crossed barrels of their rifles. There were no shots fired, but that time word got to the bishop.
And the bishop used that as an excuse to say, Mary, you're gone.
But the community has determined to support her wherever she goes. It is hard for Mother to dismiss this faithful servant in her old age.
Mother Amadeus loved her so much that then she set Mary up with a restaurant in Cascade and basically kind of supported her. This opportunity came up to be a wagon driver for the postal, the Star Route. And Mary had to compete in order to get the job in terms of harnessing horses. She was the best at doing it.
She was the first African American to have a Star Route. Those were very important contract routes because the Postal Service was small. They couldn't possibly deliver mail to outposts like St. Peter's Mission. She not only took the mail, but she took passengers.
Just imagine being the one that not only is delivering the mail, but you can't eat mail. She was going to the trains to get the food that the nuns needed, the sugar, the coffee, the coal to burn in the stoves. And when you read in the annals, there were many nights where it's -20. And can you imagine with the wind chill?
A couple times her wagon got stuck and she had to guard over the mail and the food with a gun and wolves and all sorts of crazy stuff. But when she had a mission, Mary Fields completed it without hesitation.
After 10 years of service, she resigned at the age of 72.
Mary couldn't feel like she could do the job, and so then she opened up a laundromat. And Mary truly was, and if not the most popular person in Cascade at the time, and in fact, she was a mascot for the baseball team.
She was more comfortable with the men in the community, and because of her personality, she was welcome in their inner sanctums, which makes her possibly unique in Montana for African American women.
She was the only woman permitted in the bars. She smoked cigars, she drank whiskey.
That's a feisty woman, because there was no other white woman and no black man at that time in Montana that would have been welcomed in the saloon.
Admiring Mary for her character, that she was loyal, that she was strong, that she was brave, that she was resourceful. All of those things are something that even today we can look up to this woman.
She's a hero, there's no question about it.
What would she have buried? Or what would they have buried out here?
What is that?
This is really exciting, and we're just so thankful that the new owners allow us to come out and be able to do this and dig this up. And yeah, it's amazing. And you know, we've got a couple other objectives to do today, but you know, yeah, it's just cool to finally get a chance. We've been out here once before, but this is kind of a part of history we get to take home now.
As humans, we want to know who we are and where we're from.
We had a great-grandmother out there that we didn't know anything about.
Nobody would give us answers, and maybe because they didn't know, you know? And we started researching and we discovered who she was.
Annie Eliza Busby is my great-grandmother.
And boy, did we open up a can of worms.
Definitely man-made, definitely the same size as the house by dimension.
It really started in about 2019. That is the first time we start really digging into Annie's past. We got a subscription to newspapers.com, started getting articles, started building the fascination around who is this woman and why have we never heard about her. Then we started to work backwards and looking at, okay, what drove her here? The first thing we find really is her Homestead Act.
This is what this whole experience is about, you know? Finding how could a single woman come from Palouse, Washington, out to Montana?
She brought 3 children with her. They were young, a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 12-year-old.
She came out here on her own, She homesteaded out in the middle of central Montana.
There's still wagon trail marks that exist today this way.
If we go back in time for a moment, so Annie would have grown up on a farm, her parents divorced. Annie, there's gaps in there that we know that by the age of 14, she left for a while. And in that time frame, her mother marries Francis Busby. Her mother dies from giving birth. She and the child died. So Francis is left with all these children. It's up to like 9 children now. And he tracks her down and brings her back. She goes back at the age of 18. By 19, they're married. Francis is much older. He's about 25 years older than her. And we think there was something, maybe not, I don't know if I'd use the word forced, but we know that she had to do it.
I think this fence.
And he had 7 children with Francis and 1 with somebody else, and which would end up being my grandmother.
I think my grandfather would have dug it out. It's square now.
One day, when Francis decides that he's going to move the family to Nebraska, and so they take this trip by train to Nebraska, and this is in 1907. And while they're down there, it's February 1907, while they're down there, Francis dies suspiciously. And in the newspaper articles that we have, it was basically by like poison in a medical term. Annie immediately gets the children on the train, takes all the furniture, and goes back. And then all of a sudden we find out in April of 1908, which we don't have the birth certificate, she gives birth. So when she got back, we know that her neighbor Andrew Jackson was, something happened between the two of them. We don't know what, but it also spurred her to move back, to go look for land elsewhere. We find her on November 15th, 1909, standing in line here in Great Falls, Montana.
We know that she was the only female that got the homestead when they first gave this, or this property and land out here became homestead, available for homestead.
She picked that spot in Power, Montana, 312 acres.
This is where her homestead was. And it's just eroded over the years enough to where, but it's definitely a man-made dig out.
So the first challenge comes when she's ready to have her land inspected, and they come out and they say, well, we can't because you don't have a man present to sign for you. And the inspector leaves without her land being approved. He then comes back, and this time around with a little bit of back and forth, and you can see in her Homestead Act, not arguing, but saying, I've done all these improvements myself, this is my land. And the inspector says, find me 4 men, and Annie basically says, you can find 4 men. And he does. Annie received her patent, signed by Woodrow Wilson, in 1914. She starts with wheat and oats. And later we find out through mortgages that she took out on the land is when she started planting seed for those mortgages. And when you dig into those, it was to plant barley. So when you look back at that time frame, what may have drove that is barley was at $2.95 a bushel. So she was actually saw that obviously, and people were talking about doing it, and she did it.
That's man-made, dude.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, this water ran right here, so they would have dug a well right there.
One of the things she did is she put wells in, a number of wells that still exist out there on the farm. I think she made a little bit of money off of it by being one of the first to plant, and then barley in that area. It's kind of cool because it correlates well with what the tap house is, where we're a beer bar, we do craft beer. And barley was exported
and imported in Montana, but not many did it back in those days.
Think about a woman who was out in the middle of the prairie in a time that men made all the decisions, and she didn't give a damn. And we know that in her writings and stuff. So she broke those barriers. It's an inspiration to all.
Yeah, this just got stuck in there, I think.
We knew, when we got the Homestead Act, we knew where her place was. We kind of knew where the house was. It was, we got a hold of the property owners, and then we got a hold of the property owners who owned it before. So they knew kind of where it was. They knew her wagon was still out here because that was passed down through their grandparents. Like, yeah, that was Annie, the lady who was here first. That was her wagon. And they were kind enough to let us come out and take the wagon and have it in our family.
Is that amazing? And for the time period, I mean, it's amazing when we see that would have still been there. And on that wagon, it does notate that it's a 1910 model. So it does have that plate on there, and we are able to identify it, that she would have purchased that back in 1910.
That is so cool.
And you think, holy, how she was not the norm. How did she get away with it?
You see that feistiness of being bold and being this woman that was driven to want to be successful and do it on her own.
She's a remarkable woman. It's pretty awesome to be a descendant from her.
I don't think I'm overreacting when I say she's one of my favorite persons ever.
Skip forward to today and you can find Alma's imprint all over Montana. Alma was born along Spring Creek in what was Lewistown in its early years. And then when Alma was about 6 years old, Emma and Martin, the Smiths, moved to Great Falls, Montana.
We see her in the Great Falls Public Schools as a top student, always.
Alma then became the only African American in her class at Great Falls High School.
She graduates 1934. Her principal helped her to get to Talladega College. Surprisingly, she actually got her degrees in social work and psychology.
And so she would work at Talladega, the college library at Talladega, and spend summers at Columbia University, and she received her library science degree at Columbia. Pretty unusual for any woman or man, certainly for a young black woman from Montana. And by then, of course, it was in the early 40s, she had met Marcus Jacobs, who was living there around Talladega. He went into World War II, but came out in 1945, and they were married. And Alma drugged him, probably kicking and screaming, I don't know that for a fact, to Great Falls, Montana. That's when things began to happen here that hadn't happened before. Alma was hired very soon after her return as the catalog librarian at the Great Falls Public Library. And that's, as far as I've been able to determine, the first professional job that opened to an African American woman in Great Falls.
She came here to actually start the catalog, to do the professional work to make sure that the books were entered well.
She had worked at the library here for 8 years when the head librarian retired, and the library board appointed an African American as head librarian. Now, they did it very cautiously because they wanted to determine the reaction of the staff and the community, so they made her acting librarian for the first 6 months. And it just immediately became clear the staff loved her.
Look at those smiles, look at those people. She had ideas, she had neat ideas.
Alma became head librarian, and her two goals from the very beginning were, number one, begin a bookmobile. The second goal was a tough one, and that was a new library.
She said, we need a better facility for our children and for everyone, but she just kept going out and meeting with still more community groups, the Rotarians, any women's club.
And it failed. She tried again the next opportunity, and that failed. But that's a feisty woman that would continue to the third bond issue.
And it took until 1965 before they finally backed a library bond and said, you're right, we need to do things.
We call it the House at Alma building.
It's no secret that on the outside of this building you see her heralded, and rightly so, as a person who worked for the rights of all people. Everyone had the right to this house, to Alma's house.
She was so advanced in her concepts and her ideas, she became a community leader culturally as well as in civil rights, and all the while running a first-class operation at the library.
She was the Librarian of the Year in 1968.
In 1973, she was named Montana State Librarian. She led, in fact, Dorothy Bond, who was very, very active in both library and civil rights activities around Great Falls, said that Alma Jacobs had more influence on breaking racial barriers here than any other individual. She was very unusual in personality because while she was soft-spoken, she had an iron will, and she was persistent, and she was consistent and persistent.
A very active person, active within her church, active in various organizations, wherever she was allowed to be. One of her outstanding things, again, I think, is she didn't regard that, as others might, as a brick wall. If she couldn't get to people one way, she got to them another. She was never held up by the values of others. She had her own values, and she knew what she wanted for this town, and she did her very best, and it was great.
Well, howdy. I'm Nancy Cooper Russell, the wife of Charlie Russell. Some people called me Robber Nancy because I was always trying to insist he get the right price for his paintings, and some people thought that was a robbery. And other people called me Robber Nancy because I often would make Charlie come home and paint instead of spending all his afternoons with his friends, thus robbing them of their time with him. I was born.
When you look at the scope of what Great Falls and Montana has to offer as far as feisty women, there are quite a few stories, but Nancy is unique.
Her story is a really unique one. It starts off kind of sad.
Nancy was originally born in Kentucky on a tobacco farm.
A really kind of sad state. Her parents didn't have a lot of money, and then her father, James Cooper, actually abandons her and her mom. And so they kind of struggled for a bit until Texas Annie, that's her mom's name, remarried James Allen, and they moved to Helena.
Her stepfather moved them out here to Montana so he could go play gold hunting. And I mean play. They stayed in Helena, he went to all the different new gold rush sites.
But her taste in men still wasn't the best, and he wasn't around. So they had another daughter named Ella, but he kind of abandoned them as well. So Nancy was doing what she could to help her mom and her sister out. She was trying to find a couple jobs to have a source of income to help them out, and then her mom dies. And she's only 14, 15 years old, and her mom is now gone, and her stepfather comes back and takes his daughter Ella and just abandons Nancy.
Nancy was actually the one that arranged her own mother's funeral and had her buried there.
So it's a really sad story to think about this woman who has moved across the country, doesn't know a lot of people, has been working just to survive.
Her mother's friends, the Roberts, needed a live-in babysitter is the best way to put it. So they brought her out to Cascade, and that's where Nancy lived for about 4 years.
Nancy was a live-in maid at that point. She was taking care of the Robertsons' 3 children.
During this time, she meets Mr. Roberts' friend C.M. Russell.
They knew Charlie and invited him over for dinner one night. And there's some recollections that Nancy has told about that she saw Charlie and immediately was kind of interested.
He was really quite dreamy.
And they seemed pretty interested in each other, so that was kind of fun.
Comes in, he's wearing these long black pants and boots and a red sash and a white shirt and a big broad Stetson on his head. And I was just smitten. He had a chiseled cheek and a really beautiful penetrating gaze. But when he turned, he winked at me, and I knew there was something going on. So all through
about a year or so after they met, they got married. They got married at the Roberts Ranch out there in Cascade, and that's where the honeymoon cabin is.
Charlie is still working on trying to become an artist, and Nancy is just trying to take care of the household at this point. They did not have a lot of money. They were pretty broke.
He wasn't making money as an artist. He thought he should go back to cowboy, and I said, well, you'll be a starving cowboy. Why don't we move to Great Falls? Because there's more people, and we can work on getting your art marketed.
It was recommended to him that maybe his wife take over that part of the business. And so about a year or 2 after they first get married, Nancy starts kind of getting involved in that.
And you can see how she went from prairie girl to businesswoman in later years.
She was smart and business savvy when it came to negotiating prices, finding the investors or the people who would actually buy the work.
Charlie had done a little watercolor for someone in town. He asked me to go deliver it, and he said, don't you dare ask for more than $25. And I said, I didn't say anything, of course. I got to the house, and the woman said, love it. How much is it? And I said, $35. And she said, I'll write you a check.
She also set up shows in New York and California. I mean, the Prince of Wales bought Charlie Russell's 2 of his paintings.
Charlie was becoming, with my help, the most famous and highest paid artist in the world.
So this is Nancy's desk, and we have photographs of Nancy writing correspondence to friends and family, but also to the patrons or the people who have made commissions for Charlie's work. A lot of the negotiations didn't always happen in the house. It happened through letters.
You've ever heard that phrase, behind every successful man is a woman. It's very true with this couple.
I made him get up at dawn. He'd bring me some tea, and he'd go over and work all morning. He'd come back for lunch at 12, he'd have a little nap, and then he'd go to the saloon with his friends. I told him, Charlie, that meant 2 drinks. Sometimes he'd come back and he'd say, and sometimes he'd come back and he'd say, and I said, Charlie, a serious artist can't drink, you gotta work.
She knew what she wanted. She went after it and just became that businesswoman. Towards the end of Charlie's life, his health has kind of taken a dip. He's not doing the best. So they have removed a giant goiter on his neck. Doctors, once they go in, they realize his heart's not in the best shape. So one doctor's in the hall telling Nancy the bad news that Charlie is not going to be alive for a lot longer. And she's like, thank you for letting me know, don't tell Charlie. Well, she didn't realize that there was a doctor in Charlie's room telling him the exact same thing. And Charlie's like, thank you, don't tell Nancy. So they both had kind of come to terms with what was happening, but neither one of them wanted the other one to know. And I think that's kind of a beautiful part of their love story, of not wanting the other one to worry.
When he passed away, it was sad for me to stay in our house, so I moved with my son. We had an adopted son, Jack. We moved to California.
There's a place there that Charlie and Nancy had called Trails End, and that's where she lived out the rest of her life. Her ability to recognize what he had, what he was capable of, especially, you know, she had no training. I mean, there's no mention of her going to school or any of that. I mean, I'm sure she at least attended elementary school in Helena and stuff, but, you know, after her mother died, she was already 16. There was no further education, but she herself had a certain intuition.
She's been described as headstrong, but I think she was smart and witty, and I think that is a way to also think about Nancy. She was loving and caring, not just a feisty woman, but she had so many different hats that she wore.
I would say that her legacy is just as important as Charlie's, because Charlie wouldn't exist without her.
Charlie Russell was my man, and I was dedicated to promoting his life and his legacy till the end of my days. Thank you very much.
Do you consider yourself feisty?
Well, that's a new word. I've never been called feisty before, but I kind of like it.
She may have never been called feisty, but Norma Ashby Smith is the embodiment of a feisty woman. Tenacious, determined, and unwavering. Her commitment to the community has truly shaped Great Falls.
I just love people, and that makes a difference. And everybody has a story, and everybody loves to tell their story, most everybody. And so that's been my job, to get their stories out of them.
A storyteller, broadcaster, philanthropist, and community mastermind. Norma was born and raised on a ranch near Winston, outside of Helena, Montana.
I went to a one-room schoolhouse near Beaver Creek, which was just across the road from where we lived, our ranch was. And there were 9 of us in the school, and my big sister, Anne Marie, was in there with me. One of my funnest memories was appearing in my first public appearance at that one-room schoolhouse. That was my first live audience. And I was thrilled to death. I wasn't even afraid. I was so thrilled to be there and to do that performance.
Her propensity for public appearances became evident at an early age. She had a heart for storytelling and pursued that passion.
I majored in journalism at the University of Montana, and that was a great experience. And then I moved to New York City and worked there for 4 years, and I worked for Life magazine there. I had to get a job in 2 weeks, or my mother said, you have to come home.
Eventually, a family health emergency brought her back to Montana, specifically to Great Falls.
I couldn't find a job in journalism, so I was hired at the farm supply store, Graham and Ross, here in Great Falls, and loved that clerking job. But one day a salesman from KRTV walked in the door and learned about my background in journalism, and he said, you know, I think we have an opening. Why don't you go up and apply? It was for a daily TV show called Today in Montana. And I thought, well, that's probably more of my talents. And so I did apply with Dan Snyder. He said, well, what experience have you had in broadcasting? I said, well, none, but I think I could do this job. I think it sounds wonderful. Well, he hired me, and I don't know who was more shocked, myself or my mother, because I knew she didn't know about any kind of broadcasting I'd had either.
And that was the start of a 26-year career in television.
I turned to my boss, Dan Snyder, who owned KRTV at the time, and I said, do you have any advice to give me of what I should or shouldn't do when I'm on the air? And he said, just 2 things to remember. If you remember these 2 things, you'll go far in broadcasting. I said, oh, good, what are they? And he says, number 1, don't swear, and number 2, don't pick your nose on the air. And we're armed with that valuable advice. I went forward, and I was so content in that role. But then I got a real comeuppance because he was funny, and I would laugh at his jokes and stuff. And then I got this criticism from some of my viewers saying, can't stand your laugh, and what's worse, you make Dan laugh the way you laugh. So I thought, oh no. So I didn't laugh for 2 or 3 days, and here come the opposite side of the handle, and they said, you can't stand your laugh, and what's worse, you laugh just the way Dan laughs. And so that was not good. So for days I didn't laugh, and then here comes the opposite calls. Why aren't you laughing? Are you sick? So I learned a really important lesson about public appearances, and that is just be yourself, and if they don't like you, they know how to turn you off. And so that's what I learned.
She would go on to interview more than 26,000 people.
I did have some exciting times and some scary times. My most scary interview was interviewing a rattlesnake handler from Rainsford, Montana, Cyril Kolarczyk. And he brought a live rattlesnake on the show, and I thought I was going to faint. This darn rattlesnake He teased it till it struck, and he didn't strike at me, but if he would have, I wouldn't be here today. But anyway, he made it strike, and then he brought it right up to the camera, and he put a pencil right under its fangs. So here was my viewers looking right down the throat of the snake. And then the climax came when he decided to slaughter it on the air. So he took out a knife, went and slaughtered it, and 13 baby rattlesnakes spilled out onto the floor. Well, you know, when you're on TV, you're paid to speak. Well, I couldn't speak at that one because here lay all these little baby rattlesnakes squirreling around on the floor. And later we had to scoop them up with a shovel, take them out the back door of the studio, and bury them because they were poisonous too. So that was an interview I'll never forget to this day. Anyway, that was exciting, and I darn near fainted.
Her genuine personality and experiences with viewers earned her the Montana Television Broadcaster of the Year Award in 1985. In 2010, she was inducted into the Montana Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
You've been called the First Lady of Montana Television.
Oh, thank you.
What does that role mean to you?
Well, it means a lot. I mean, it was a great time we went on the air for the first time in 1962, February 19th to be exact. And we're on there till 1988, 26 years. And so that's a long time to be in one spot on television.
Norma's work on air was just the beginning of her influence. Her life has been about amplifying the voices and contributions of others, as evidenced by the many organizations and events she's founded or helped shape, including a now long-standing signature event.
The auction turned out to be a very big deal in Great Falls. We tried to start that as a new fundraiser in Great Falls. People said, oh, that'll never work. Who wants to honor a dead artist? Because we wanted to name it after Charlie Russell. And my friends weren't impressed with that idea at all. They said, he's dead. Why do you want to honor him? And I said, well, he's the most important citizen we had here. And so anyway, they finally said, well, we'll try it once. And so we did. And it just shot off like it was supposed to be.
Despite the naysayers, the Russell auction evolved into Western Art Week, an extraordinary tradition now of nearly 6 decades.
What kept you going? What kept you determined to make this something important?
I think you just have to be dedicated to an idea.
Her resolve also led to the creation of the I Like Charlie Russell essay contest, the Waking the Dead tours, and many more.
There's an adage that is well known around Great Falls that you don't say no to Norma. People say yes when you call and ask them, and you've been such a huge part of fundraising and advocacy in our community. Do you like that that's something said about you, that people can't say no to you?
Oh, I'm very thrilled that they don't.
Norma was made an honorary member of the Blackfeet tribe, was recognized with the Paris Gibson Award, named the most influential woman in Great Falls, and recently was presented with the Heritage Award from the Montana Cowgirls Association. She even got to play auctioneer for the first time at the award ceremony.
What does this community, what does Great Falls mean to you? What kind of community is Great Falls to you?
Well, it's a great community. I get very emotional about it because it's just opened its arms to me, and so many big things have happened. The centennial was held in 1964, and I was really involved in that, knee-deep in it, and gave me an experience to dress up in these hats and costumes, and it was just a wonderful opportunity. Got involved in the centennial train that went to the New York World's Fair.
All of that is just scratching the surface of Norma's legacy.
The motto is, if you have enough guts and enough courage, just do it. If you have the opportunity, don't pass it up, because you may not have it again. Be a good person and be kind to people. And I hope that I've left enough good things, and that those are the things they do remember.
Nancy, Alma, Annie, Norma, and Mary. 5 feisty women of Great Falls.